Good morning, everyone. So good to see you all on IG Live again. And look at David on time. We're about to be in the room where it happens with David Diggs. While I enter him in the chat, I definitely want to make sure I showed you my Tupac t-shirt that says the deeper the roots. And there he is.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. What's happening, man?
how are you, brother? Good to see you.
It's so good to see you, man. Um, I'm honored to be part of this book tour, bro. The stops on this tour are legendary.
No, it's crazy. I'm surprised everyone said yes. I think everyone was just like, you know what, he lost. Let's help a brother out. So I appreciate
I think you are the opposite of lost, man. The book is it's really beautiful. And like there's so much, I don't know, there's so many like wonderful, like every time I talk to you, just got me thinking about how I can do more and like what I should. I don't know. I do a lot of things, and then I read that book and was like, dang man, I really like. Where does he have the time, the hours in the day? I don't understand. You got kids, whole
two of
family.
them.
Like,
Two
wait,
of
I know. I'm
them. No,
saying
it's different with kids. I'm gonna slow down.
you should. Um, but no, man, congratulations and thank you for putting it out into the world and yeah, I'm just um yeah, so much.
Well, look. Well, first, let me just say hi to everyone who joined us on this live. And again, David, just
What up, peoples?
for being the stop on probably the stop on the book tour. And I know you're super busy, so the fact that you even had time to crack it open and read means a lot to me, brother. So definitely appreciate you. And Anna's in a different room somewhere watching as well, and she says hi.
Hey, hello to her as well. Yeah, we gotta actually hang out in physical space at some point soon, man.
Are you back in SoCal or are you still in
I
Canada?
am. I am.
Okay,
I'm back in SoCal, and I'm mostly here. I got to make a couple of trips, but I'll be here a bunch. So let's do it.
okay, for sure. I'm in.
Yeah, yeah. Hey man, I don't know how these things are supposed to work, but I do have a bunch of things I want to ask you about
Yeah,
this
yeah.
book.
Just talk.
All right, say. So I'm wondering, one of the things I found super inspirational about the book was that, as you know, like I think about place a lot, and I think about the place where I'm from a lot, and I think about Oakland as a character a lot. It's a big thing we work with on our show on Blind Spotting, and the first like few chapters of this book are really dedicated to setting up Stockton as a major character in your life, and it's so foundational for understanding the specifics of your upbringing are really. I was constantly struck by the way that they keep reappearing throughout the book and how they really do like you seem very aware about how that provided a foundation and narrative for the way that you interact with the world and for the choices that you've made. And I wonder about that. I wonder about like how do you like what is the character of Stockton to you? You know what I'm saying? Personified. Like what because like I have my thoughts from reading what you wrote, but like just as a I know that stuff's always hard to get into the actual thing. Like Stockton as a character to you, how what's she like? You know?
Well, what's interesting about that is sort of in watching Blind Spotting at the movie before the series, watching Blind Spotting at was that South by 2015, was it?
Some
No, I was married. It might have been 2017.
17, yeah, yeah.
I remember watching it and telling Anna, and I was like, I love the way they made. Because I had just signed the book deal, and I was like, I love the way they made him such a character. Like it's about a lot of things, but fundamentally, it's about rapid change in this place, and what does that mean for community? What does that mean for interactions?
Mm,
Um, etc. So, someone asked what book it is. In the deeper the roots, the book that just came out Tuesday. I did my best to make Stockton a character because Stockton just looms so large in my life. And part of that choice was because there's been a lot of caricatures of Stockton over time, particularly the 30 years I've been alive. It's always been known for violence, or always
mm,
for poverty, or always been known for dysfunction, or I've always been known for like really negative things. So I really want to complicate that notion and really talk about Stockton out how I know her. I love her. She gets on my nerves. A paradox. She great and terrible at the same time, right? But there's so much love and so much sort of growth and skills that come from that place. So I just want to make sure throughout the book that there be an example of Stockton being described from someone who actually loves Stockton, someone who actually spent a decade working to improve Stockton, someone who was born and raised on the other side of Stockton as well. I wanted to make sure that was part of it too, that it was about sort of not just, because I mean, like every place, there's really nice places, but that's not where I grew up. So I wanted to make sure we talked about what it was like growing up in South Stockton. And it wasn't all bad, but it wasn't all great. It was a mix of both. I just wanted to make sure we were super honest about that.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it's really successful at that. And like I said, like you know, when you talk about traveling to El Salvador or to South Africa, like I love that whole chapter, and like the sort of realizations or tie-ins that you keep making to like your own upbringing. And like you said there was that amazing passage about the work, the AIDS, like aid organizations bringing baseball equipment to El Salvador, and all of them being like, we don't play baseball. And you're just like, the people trying to help, not listening to what the community actually needs. And I remember, you know, from you, that was like such a major point for when you were mayor too, like always sort of direct line to the community, like asking what people need. The couple of times I came up there and worked with you and stuff, and you were always like talking directly to people, asking what they wanted. And that I was once again just struck by that connection. Oh, he lived through this in Stockton, watched it happen, then got to go globally and watch it play out in the rest of the world. And I thought that was it's just so telling about the kind of person that you are and the way that you think about things, and your sort of dedication to not let the fact that this is the way it's always been done dictate that this is the way it should be, you know.
Well, what's wild is that El Salvador was my first time abroad, and being just young and dumb, I was like, I'm American, I'm not going abroad. The name of the book is The Deeper the Roots, and in it, as David was saying, I talk about going to El Salvador. And in El Salvador, it just shook me to my core, because I had thought I knew poverty, but global poverty just hits a little bit different. Like global poverty makes you actually thankful in many respects. And I remember a story that I seen you talk about where literally the village priest was like, don't let your left hand know what the right hand's doing, right? Don't something good everyone else needs to know. And then right after that, our delegation got up and was like, we give you baseball bats and baseballs. and then that night, I was with my host family throwing our little shade, and they were like, come follow us. So they took me to a shed and they opened it up, and it's all baseball bats. So I'm like, what is this? And they're like, every year y'all come and bring us baseball bats, but we play soccer. And that stuck with me because it was so funny, because A, we thought we were doing something. B, I was also wise on them to be like, you know what, if they're happy giving us baseball bats, we're not going to correct them as long as they help us with some other stuff. But C, to your point, it taught me that the most important thing is just to listen to people, because you might not know what you're talking about. And people know what they need. And I think you see that in the basic income work. You see that in a lot of the work in Stockton, but really from that experience where I was like, I don't want to ever give someone something, and then when I leave, they'd be like, look, we got a whole bunch of these, because that's not actually what we play soccer.
Such a good scene, man. But yeah, I feel like that's exactly right. And there are like so many really telling moments of like that in the book. I don't know, folks, that y'all got to read this book, man. Oh, everyone's asking where in the world can the book be bought? It's on Amazon, right? It's on Audible.
Yeah, it's on
Amazon. Yeah. Y'all should also like. I mostly read books. I have kind of like a hard time with Audible and with audiobooks. But I read yours in like a combination of the two ways, you know, and it was dope. It's also Michael Tubbs reads his own book also on Audible, and it's fly having the experience of your own emphasis in the parts that are important to you, you know what I'm saying? Because I realized that like the reading voice in my head is not your voice, it's my voice. It was like a cool experience. I don't think I've ever read a book like in both ways, both modes at the same time.
Hmm.
And it was a cool one. And also like you're great at it, man. Like I recommend folks listen to it on Audible just so you can hear Michael read his book.
Well, it's funny because when I was doing it, I'm extra, so I had like this little chain. So I like would go in the I would go in the studio with my chain on. Like I was really serious. I had my throat coat.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You gotta release the footage. I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to
I have a little bit. It's really funny. I'm literally like, you literally think I'm about to spit like some bars, and then I'm like talking about
turn me
Stanford.
up. Yeah. I need it. Yeah.
Talking about politics.
It's dope.
No, but the audiobook was hard because like even when you write it, you still hear a voice in your head that's not like your voice. And then when you read it, you start getting choked up and emotional, like, oh man, like especially writing about my mom or my dad or who died, or even when I got upset, like some of the parts I'm still angry about.
Yeah.
Like they did that did like it was interesting. It took a long time too. I was surprised. Like so shout out to folks like you that do this for a living because it wasn't easy and it's just I didn't have to be a character. I was just being me. And it took a lot of time.
Well, audiobooks are particularly hard though. They're also just it's just so much language and like you have to nail every word and you can't, you know, I mean, it's a lot of work.
And I mispronounce everything. So I was like, it's like how you say, I know how to spell it, and I know what it means, but what does this book, how do I say the words? My coach should have to pronounce words for me. It was like being like third grade.
Yeah, I love that. I love that when you write a word and then have to say it out loud for the first time. You're like, oh, I actually don't know how to say this thing I wrote. Happens to me all the time. You talk about when you were young that like there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of young people on this. I don't know, maybe I'm being biased, but just judging from the profile images. And like knowing my fan base, there's a lot of young people on this live right now. Are you loved reading, and you said something that you said that reading books allowed you to imagine into a world different than the one you were living in, which I thought was really interesting because that's the same reason I started acting. That's the same thing that drew me towards being an actor is this like, and the same reason I go back and try to teach it in schools and stuff like that is because there's something really valuable about being able to imagine circumstances other than the ones you're living in, regardless of what those circumstances are, but particularly if they're, you know, if you're in an inner city or if you live in places where like there aren't as many options presented to you, right? Because it's so easy, I think, to get stuck with a limited imagination that the only things available to you are the things in front of you. And if we do that, how are any of us going to be able to continue to sort of like chip away at the systemic poverty in these areas and stuff like that? I mean,
So what was, and I didn't realize this till I was actually writing, and I was like, why did I love reading so much? So I think part of it was the imagination, but I think part of it was that, you know, when you read a book, the protagonist has ultimate agency, right? Like they're like, and there's always, usually the ending is different than the endings I would see growing up. Like usually the ending was a happy one. Like usually the ending was sort of this, it was difficult, but at some point there's success at some point. And reflecting back, I realized that books were a comfort because it was like the protagonist had like ultimate agency, that they were on the hero's journey. Like everything that happened to them happened for a reason that made sense when you got to the end of the book, and that it wasn't always disappointment, failure, struggle every chapter, but there was some levity. There was a break and a reprieve. And I think that's where we're also tracking the books. It was like, oh my gosh, like it's a different world where despite environment, folks are able to surmount challenges, and that the outcome isn't scripted. The outcome isn't fatalistic. The outcome isn't nihilistic. And I still love books, and I don't read as much as I should now, but I still love books for that reason, because it does provide sort of a way to think about the human condition, but in a way that's not so visceral to yourself.
Mm. Um, what you you seem like super aware in the book of the difference that you're straddling a number of worlds, and that there is that like the expectations placed on you based on where you're from are that who you actually are and who and what you're capable of and the work that you've done is often at odds with that.
Mm.
And I wonder about something I found very inspirational. Another way I started examining myself while reading this was that I feel similarly about myself in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Uh, and I often make light of it. I often like reduce things to jokes. And they're a little like tongue in cheek. Like I'm aware that, and it's like often self-deprecating. I do a lot of like, because I'm not really that hood, and I'm not really that academic, and I don't really often feel like I fit in the Hollywood world that I live in, although nobody really fits in here. And then but like oftentimes like, you know, the spots that I grew up in are like not, you know, even still like to me feel like they feel like I am exceptional.
Mm.
No matter how much I try to say that, like, that's just, to me, I can see the through line, you know? So I'm always making jokes about it. And there's such a confidence in where you are at the point of writing this book about like managing those dichotomies. And I found it really inspiring and also like really useful, and made me want to like stop belittling that a little bit more, because of like the usefulness for particularly young Black kids from areas like where we come from, being able to see that modeled, like that, you know, someone who is just comfortable in the fact that, yes, I'm from here and I also exist here, and I can be all of those things. I'm not half of any of those things. I am fully all of those things. And I thought that was a really just lovely kind of vibe from reading the book. And I wonder, like, how did you come about that? What do you think
Mm.
about that? Like, is that just like the years of sort of mining of yourself and retelling yourself your stories and understanding the through line in such a palpable way? Because it all comes through in this.
Yeah, I think it started in really elementary school when I
Mm,
went to that mostly white private school, and like one of the few Black kids, but was good at school and liked school. So it was, and then I would go to my friends' houses, and their houses looked way different than the house I lived in, and just learning that. But then learning that, like, by being me and just being very comfortable, even if other people weren't comfortable with me, by being comfortable with me, that I can make friends. So it started like that. Like, you know what, I'm just me, and
mm,
I know I don't completely belong here, and I know I'm different, but I'm not going to be different because the space is different. I'm not going to. I just learned early on, I guess, that's like there's no reason to change, to be different because I'm different. Like to be a different person in different surroundings. So that, I think that was part of it. And then when I got to college, I recognized that was a superpower. Like the ability, even if you don't fully fit in, or you're not fully sort of typecast, to be able to be just as comfortable as in a Stockton, as a Stanford, in a policy discussion, as in a Drake lyric conversation. I realized
mm-hmm,
that was like not many people could straddle those worlds. So then I was like, okay, maybe that's part of my superpowers. Maybe it's just this ability to be the same person in different rooms, but to go in rooms that other people who may share part of my characteristics wouldn't normally be in. But I mean,
mm.
it's still awkward. I think when it gets, but that's why I make jokes in my head. Like this is like, or like I was just on a panel this weekend with like three economic like experts, like PhDs in economics and like advisors to the president on the economy, and I was like, why am I before I got started laughing, I was like, this is so, because I'm not a PhD in economics. I haven't spent years studying inflation policy, and yet people are interested in what I think. And I think that it's just because it's still a process of just being comfortable with, look, I'm just me. This is what I can do.
Right.
And
Yeah.
also, but to your point, it's such a gift because life would be so boring if you were just like in one space or could only talk to one type of people or
Mm.
only talk about one type of thing. So
And you did also, you know, enact like a radical, well, what for the United States is a very radical economic policy, and like proved that it can work. Of course, everybody wants to talk to you about it. That makes perfect sense to me.
but it feels weird though. It's like
Yeah,
I'm in a Tupac t-shirt and flip-flops, right? And I'm always like it's just
yeah.
sort of how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself.
Right, right.
I
I feel that
and
hard.
but
Yeah.
I think part of the book is about sort of just being very comfortable with the totality of your experiences, the totality of who you are, and just showing up in a really authentic way and being here to serve.
Mm, I love that. I love that. Yeah, and it was also really interesting. You know, you're a '90s baby, really, and I'm an '80s baby. You know, so and even that slight difference. We're from similar areas. You know, like Stockton and Oakland aren't that far apart, but that it was like particularly like the stories about your pops and stuff, and like thinking about my parents and family's experience with gang life and like your family's experience with gang life, but like the slight difference between like being kind of post crack epidemic into crack epidemic to like crack epidemic and then the rest of our lives, which really like there was a you know uh I've, I found that part really interesting, and like so much of your books also like about second chances and like acknowledging where you came from and what is that, you know, what is that, and where are you going, and like you shout out like a number of times where you felt like you didn't, you know, that you acknowledge second chances that you've been given as well. um and I just wonder like what are sort of like, you know, the parts of your life. I mean, you go through them in the book, but this way we can get people to talk about it here. Like
Yeah,
parts, like sort of pivotal moments in your life that are like, this is why I am who I am and how I come to believe these things. You know?
yeah, particularly on second chances, it's been a journey that I talk about in the book because I think part of it is when you grow up with an incarcerated parent, particularly in the context of like the '90s, to your point, when it was tough on crime, when it was three strikes, when it was like law and order. It's a very different world in terms of
Mm,
the rhetoric and around criminality and criminal justice in the world we see today. You internalize that, oh, maybe this person's a bad person. So I remember being like mortified that did my father murder somebody? Did my father rape somebody? What does that say about me? Is that going to end up be my end? Are people going to judge me for that? So I would just lie about where he was all the time. Like I don't know where he is. He's out of state. He's dead. I don't know him that well, etc. But then what really struck me was when I needed a second chance because
mm,
you apply it to us like everyone needs a second chance, but it's easy to say that when you feel like, oh, but I do everything right, like I'm fine, like I don't need a second chance. But then when I was 24 and I was city council, and I talk about it in the book, which was like the one thing I almost didn't put in, but I was like, I have to put this in for it to be a real story. Was
yeah.
when I got arrested for a DUI and I literally needed a second chance. I wasn't just some 24-year-old, I was a whole council member. I represented 1,000 people, right? And sort of seeing how the community responded with so much grace and so
Mm,
much love, and how, particularly when you know you're wrong, like I wasn't victimized, I wasn't targeted. I just literally made a stupid decision and deserved consequences. And to like receive grace and a second chance when you know you don't deserve it, at least for me, was so powerful. And it unlocked a whole nother level of love and empathy and humility and like a real desire to say, well, wow, what if I was just thrown away because I made a stupid, terrible mistake? Like we wouldn't have sort of the basic income program in Stockton. We wouldn't have sort of like all the stuff that happens afterwards could have been
right.
all precluded. So it makes me think about sort of how do we create a society where we give, where there's consequences, but we also give people chances for redemption. And how much have we lost out on because we throw people away, because we counsel people. And it's not about giving second chances without, like my pastor always says, it's not grace without repentance. Like you have to be
Mm,
sorry. It's like I want to do better. But how do you make sure we have a society that allows for people to be more, like Brian Stevenson says, in the worst thing they've done? So that was
mm,
And then particularly when you're mayor, you're exposed to like the best, but also like the worst of a community. You see like folks who have done like real, particularly the work we're doing with gun violence,
Mm-hmm.
folks who have done real harm. And thinking about like, wow, how do we not make sure their only contribution to our community is this harm? Because that's a
Right.
terrible legacy for us. Like we lose out as a community, but how do we provide accountability, but also an on-ramp to be part of redemption? Because I truly believe like those who receive the most grace and the biggest second chance oftentimes will make the biggest impacts. They feel like a responsibility.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's both a huge idea that you're talking about, and then also like a really commonplace one, like something that we all like individually deal with. And that's, I guess, something that um, your kind of drive to keep working for change. And you do this on all levels, right? You're like city council, like local government, but also like working on doing policy work with the Obamas, and then like working on national policy work now, and just like all of this stuff. And you don't seem to have a ton of cynicism about it like I do. I'm super cynical, but one of the things that keeps me coming back are stories like yours and people like you who, particularly in local politics, where I find, oh, actually, like maybe we're not all just like shouting. Maybe it's not just sports. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe you don't just root for your team because you wear the colors that they wear. Like maybe we are actually having policy discussions and trying to do something. You see that at a local level sometimes, and kind of more and more the more local you get, and kind of the bigger it gets, the more it feels like that work has to happen behind the scenes, because the public facing work is just partisan, like shouting, that like doesn't do anything.
No, I think no, but I mean, I like when I lost re-election,
Yeah.
that was like I was for about 2 weeks. I was like, well, what was the point? Like, what is literally the point? Because I mean, the game's not hard. I could have easily got up there and demonized poor people and immigrants and told all the kids to pull their pants up and said,
Mm-hmm.
I went to Stanford, you could go to Stanford too. We need to be tougher on. I could like that's such an easy script. I could do that in my sleep, and I would have
Mm-hmm.
been sort of reelected. Would have been like a moderate Democrat super. So like people were like, look at him talking tough too. So I was like, and then also because I didn't, as I talk about in the book, I didn't necessarily want to go back. Like it wasn't my life's dream.
Right.
Right. But it wasn't my life's dream to be a city council person or mayor of Stockton by any stretch. So I remember being like, well, damn, you could do all this good and still lose just because some lies on the internet. Like, what's the point? But then it brought me back to like the why behind the work. It was about like, well, it's a luxury for you, Michael, to be cynical because you're going to be fine. Your kids are going to be fine. Your wife's going to be fine. Like that's such a luxury. But they're like the people you claim to like fight for and be in solidarity with. They have to have hope. They have to hope for something better, if not for them, for their children. Or it's super easy to give up. And that's what really sort of why I'm still doing the work today. Because it's like no, it's such a luxury to be like, oh, this is broken. Because for some people, it's life or death that it's fixed. And that's keep going.
Bars. Oh, damn it. That's why I needed to be here today. I needed to hear you say that to my face. Now I got to walk around with that. It is a luxury for you to be cynical. That is so real. I'm super cynical all the time, sitting here with my espresso machine in the background. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's super real, bro. Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know. I know you have a busy tour schedule, and I don't know how long these things are supposed to last, but I can keep talking to you about this forever. Everybody who just got here, The Deeper the Roots is the name of the book. Michael Tubbs wrote it. It's really, really great. There's so many gems in there. It's And it is both instructional and inspirational, I would say. Like
Mm.
I feel inspired after reading it. And also, I don't know if y'all follow me and not Michael, you should be following Michael right now, because there's going to be he's also very good at giving you actual ways to be active. And I am not. Also, if you follow me, you should know that like I don't be on the grams that much, and so like and so.
I appreciate you doing this, man. Seriously, it's such an honor.
Oh no, man. Anytime, anytime. Uh, yeah. What else? What else?
I want to be respectful of your time. So
I'm chilling, man.
let's see if there's any questions in this
Yeah.
from the audience.
Uh, you guys down here. Sorry, I've been sort of following along, but not really.
Well, I have a question for you, David. As you think about sort of blind spotting continuing, how do you draw upon sort of your experience? Not because one thing I was trying to do in the book was to kind of be hyper specific to my experience, but to tell a story about a multiplicity of experiences through centering
Mhm.
on mine. So I wonder, sort of on the medium of TV, like when you're thinking about blind spotting and sort of Oakland, there's so much like ownership of Oakland as an idea. Like, how do you
Mhm.
and Raphael think about what story of Oakland to tell, and how much of that is your story, and how much is what you've got from listening and being with people?
That's a really great question. We talk about it a lot, and I think it's daunting for us. Super interesting being in the TV space, talking about a place like Oakland where there's not a ton of representation in that space, right? And so, like, if it ain't hanging with Mr. Cooper, it's kind of us. And like, and I think there is a tendency to want to get all of it in there, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not good storytelling. So, I mean, similar to what you talked about, you discovered like telling your story is really what you can tell, and um, and letting that speak to a multiplicity of experiences. So we always try to shrink the story. We always try to say this is the story of this family. We have created these characters who are an amalgam of a bunch of different people that we know who are from there, and we're following them and their story, and whatever else we can glean from that is cool. But there's also an infinite number of, there's a whole Bay Area multiverse that we don't get into. But I think in terms of modeling, what we're hoping to do is like, if you can say, well, we were capable of telling this story, next young artist, et cetera, coming up, who's going to also try to tell a Bay Area story. What is your contribution to the multiverse now?
Mm-hmm.
What's the story you're capable of telling? If we collect enough of them, then we start to get like a representative description of the place, right?
And that's what I
Kind of.
appreciate. It's not about like this is the Oakland story. This is a story of Oakland. This is a story of family. This is a story of community. And that's what in the introduction I made. I probably didn't do a good enough job, but I tried in the introduction to make sure people realize that this is not. This is a story of Stockton. This is a story of my mom's. This is a story of incarceration. This is a story of policy failures. But it's not It's not the authoritative total story. But I like that. It's the introduction to a multiverse, and hopefully it sparks enough curiosity. So we ask
Mm.
ourselves, like, man, why don't we have more stories about what it's like to be a single mother from the single mother's perspective? Why don't we have more stories about incarceration? Why don't we have more stories about places like Stockton? Why don't we have more stories about being elected? Why we don't have more stories about being first and what that is like? So I think that's what I was trying to do in the book as well, is just to start a conversation, but spark some curiosity so people think about, like, wow, how much are we missing because we never asked? How come we don't see Oakland on TV? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what it's like in Stockton, and because I think there's so much there
Yeah.
to unearth and learn from.
Oh, for sure, for sure, for sure. Uh, Alicia Bankton asks, how would you describe your experience writing? Have you learned anything new after writing the book that you didn't know before writing the
Yeah, writing is hard. Maybe because I'm not a real
Amen.
writer. Like
No,
writing,
no, no. Writing is hard. Full stop.
it took 4 years. So I started in 2017, but I wrote most of it in 2020. Well, wrote all of it in 2020, really. But it was hard, hard, hard because you're thinking about not only what you want to say, but how you want to say it. You want it to be good. It's about yourself, so you feel like I don't want to sound extra. I want to be honest. How are other people going to take what I have to say? Because it's not just about you. It's about the other people in your life. But it was also very therapeutic. And it was so helpful to write it when my son was born because it gave me sort of a window to think about, okay, what do I want my son to know about his family, his father before he got here? Right? Like what are some of the stories that would help him understand why his dad's a little bit crazy, or why his dad is very tough, or why his dad has a lot of fun. Like I want to provide some context for him so when he's 15, 16 years old and I'm on his nerves, he's like, okay, but I get it. This may be why. And it was also a great window to think about my parents. Like I never spent as much time thinking about my father as I did when writing the book. And I learned why he was incarcerated for the first time through writing the book, which is why I was like curious before. But
Right.
I learned a lot about my mom and why she may have been tough or why she may have been high expectations, etc. Because I was thinking about like her growing up and being 16 with a child, etc. And then helped me think about so it was therapeutic. So I would tell everyone, even if it's not going to get published, spend some time to think about your life as a story. At least for me, was very therapeutic and provides like a clear path forward. And I think it to the point about cynicism, it also helped me not be cynical. Cause I was like, dude, you're really upset. You're really mad. Like all the good things that have happened for you, you're really upset. Like this is the straw that's going to break the camel's back for you. Like, come on. And but it's just writing, and then also just all these other times when things didn't go ideal, or things weren't fair, or there was rejection, and seeing what comes afterwards. It's always something bigger or better. And writing helped provide that clarity. So to be concise, I think what's powerful about writing is that it's such a internal and isolating process that it causes a focus and a clarity about sort of who you are, what shapes you, etc. And then you recognize there's so much more you could have put in that you didn't.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, even as someone who writes all the time, the thinking about it that intentionally in terms of like I'm going to sit down and tell the story of like my origin story or whatever for this part of the book, and having to do that research and think about yourself as a story worthy of that kind of research, the way I research everything. I don't do that. And I think, yeah, that's dope. And I get that sort of it's amazing that you like found out the story of your father's incarceration in order to write this book, right? That you need to have a reason to do that, which is true for all of it. Like, there's so many things I don't know about my family or about other people who are really important to me because like I haven't given myself a reason to go talk to them about it,
No, I think I was also scared, right? I was just always scared because I didn't want it to be like a prophecy for me. And then when I found out why, and I'm not going to spoil it because it's an important part of the book and it makes sense of like all the stuff after, it messed me up. Because I was like, wow, I had all this shame, all this embarrassment, all this anger, and never even thought to ask, okay, well, what actually happened? and then when I found out, if I didn't cry, I wanted to because it just hurt. I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And because it ties in with economic security, it ties into sort of policy choices. And I think moving forward, it's given me even more of a appreciation of the unintended impacts of policy on families. That you're signing a law, you're thinking you're just making a rule based off like some conversation you had or some very flawed understanding of the world. But like what you do when you have power creates real consequences that are cascading and impact generations, right? And sort of just thinking how in my father's case, the 3 strikes law in California, that if you commit 3 crimes, you get 25 years to life, created such cascading impacts and effects that are reverberating even as we speak today. And I'm sure those who developed the law didn't have that in mind, right? Weren't really thinking about, wow, with the stroke of this pen, I'm determining the destiny of families, of communities, of neighborhoods, just by fighting. And that's why for those of you guys considering politics, go in, but go in understanding that it has impact and it matters.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's one of the things we talk about in Blind Spotting a lot, is that like what we try to tell there is the story of the system's impact on the family outside. We have a lot of stories being told about life inside, both fantastical and like hard hitting and gritty, but like we wanted to really focus on how a family situation is turned upside down due to the carceral state. And so.
And what it does, like, did some, probably should have did a little bit more just probing the internal life of what is it like growing up in the shadow of an incarcerated parent and growing up with this sort of almost constant foreboding, like, is that going to be me? like, is there something in my DNA that means I'm going to be like this? Because like growing up, particularly when I was like in elementary school, that was like real fear. And I think that's why I went so hard in class, because I was like, I'm going to be the exact opposite because I feel this creeping. No, I don't want it at all.
That's why I need to talk to you offline about this stuff too. The Sean, the Miles' son in the show, is like, that's exactly what he's going through this season. We spend a little more time with him and get on the inside of him. We've talked to a bunch of people, but it'd be great to get your perspective about it. Yeah.
Well, look, I appreciate you, brother. I can't wait to see you in person. I appreciate just the light you bring and the probing conversation. Feels like therapy, which is always good when it's free. So thank you.
Hey, same to you, man. Thank you. And thank you for the book. And thank you for always providing just like a great example. I always feel inspired after I talk to you. And yeah, it's a great time, man. Say what's up to Oprah for me.
I mean, she's like a fairy godmother. She comes in and she comes out. So she came in for book club, and if I see her again, I'll make sure I say
just sprinkle fairy dust bounce.
Seriously, she's like, all right, here you go.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Yeah. But anyway, man, congratulations. My dogs say congratulations. Also, The Deeper the Roots is the name of the book. It's available wherever you get books.
Yeah, anywhere. Indie bookstores, Amazon, Bookshop, everywhere.
Go get it. International folks, get it on Amazon. If you have an indie bookshop in your neighborhood, please go support them if you can. But however you get the book, go read the book. You will come away feeling a little bit taller, I think, and more inspired. That's what happened to me. So, yeah, man.
Well, thank you, brother. Hopefully see you before the end of the year.
Yeah. Let's get it. Good luck on the rest of the tour.
All right. Thank you, brother.
All right.
Well, that was wild. I loved it. I was trying not to be too much of a fan because I'm like the biggest Daveed Diggs fan. I was trying my hardest not to quote Hamilton lyrics, but he's awesome. And again, you guys, the book is The Deeper the Roots. You can get it anywhere books are sold. And later on today, I have a conversation with Jacqueline Woodson, who's incredible. And then I have a conversation with Bernice King about the book, The Deeper the Roots. So here you go. The Deeper the Roots, Michael Tubbs, wherever books are sold. Thank you all for joining. See my Tupac shirt that says The Deeper the Roots. And I'll talk to you guys soon.